I've told you before about people who tried to cross the poles, by ship, by sled dogs, by balloon, even on foot. But I don't think I've ever told you about those who tried to do it with something the size of a horizontal apartment building. Well, that's the story you're watching right now. By the late 1930s, the world was gripped by fierce excitement and competition over Antarctic exploration. Everyone wanted to be the first to conquer that frozen hell. And of course, the United States wanted its own slice of the icy cake, preparing to unveil one of the wildest machines ever designed for that mission. This bold idea came from polar explorer and engineer Thomas Poulter. As an engineer, he had joined Admiral Richard Byrd's 1934 Antarctic expedition. There, he saw firsthand how deadly the conditions could be, and even saved the admiral's life once, rescuing him from a blizzard with a tracked tractor. That experience convinced Poulter of one thing: in Antarctica, a reliable vehicle could mean the difference between life and death. That became his mission, to cross the frozen continent safely. When he returned home, he had one clear goal: to design a massive snow vehicle that could travel across Antarctica from end to end. Up to that point, sleds and tractors hadn't been effective against deep cracks, crevasses, and soft snow. Poulter wanted to fix that, with a radical, Titanic-scale machine. He envisioned a long-nosed, heavy vehicle that could bridge ice gaps using its own body. If the front wheels fell into a crevasse, the nose would reach the opposite edge, and the vehicle could pull itself forward and keep going. It was a bold plan, but it needed funding. That support came in 1939, when Poulter pitched his concept to high-ranking officials and senators in Washington, D.C. Against all odds, he convinced them to back this bizarre yet visionary idea. The project's cost was estimated at $150,000, about $3.5 million today, an astonishing amount for the time. For Poulter, it was about engineering and exploration. For the U.S. government, it was about prestige. After months of discussions, Congress approved it. Yes, he was actually allowed to build it. The machine Poulter and his team designed was unlike anything the world had ever seen. They called it the Snow Cruiser, a kind of mobile polar base. It was about 55 feet long, 20 feet wide, and its height could adjust between 12 and 16 feet, depending on the wheel position. The whole thing weighed around 75,000 pounds, roughly the size of a 5-story building laid on its side. With such dimensions, the Snow Cruiser could bridge ice crevasses up to 50 feet wide using its own frame. The front wheels could hang in the air while the rear ones pushed it forward. One of its most striking engineering features was the wheels themselves. And this is where Goodyear came in as a sponsor, eager to attach its name to the giant. The 4 tires were mounted toward the center of the body. Each one was 10 feet tall and about 3 feet wide, custom-made for this project. But the most surprising part? They were completely smooth, no tread at all. Goodyear designed them with special cold-resistant rubber, not to grip the snow, but to prevent buildup and let the cruiser slide like a sled when needed. At least, that was the theory. Each wheel had its own independent 75-horsepower motor, giving the Snow Cruiser a total of 300 horsepower. A revolutionary setup for the 1930s. Inside, the vehicle was practically luxurious for an expedition craft. It included living and working quarters, a 3-person control room, an engine room, a kitchen that doubled as a darkroom for developing film, sleeping bunks, a small bathroom, and even a repair workshop with welding equipment. Below the floor sat a massive fuel tank holding about 2,500 gallons of diesel, enough for roughly 5,000 miles of range. That meant it could theoretically make a round trip across the entire continent. And because that wasn't ambitious enough, they even decided to mount a plane on top. Yes, a real twin-wing aircraft that could be lowered with a winch to conduct aerial surveys. It would serve as the eyes of the Snow Cruiser. Another 1,000 gallons of aviation fuel were stored in tanks on the roof. With all these features, the Snow Cruiser captured the imagination of scientists and the American public alike. This wasn't science fiction, it was real. Even before reaching Antarctica, it was already a legend in the making. When the project was approved, it was August 8, 1939. The team's departure was set for November 15, giving Poulter and his crew only 11 weeks to build the entire thing and load it onto a ship bound for Antarctica. An impossible deadline, but for dreamers, impossible just means a little more work. Working around the clock in shifts, engineers and workers built the giant piece by piece. They practically lived in the workshop for those 11 weeks, sleeping beside the unfinished machine. After just 6 weeks, the impossible happened: the Snow Cruiser was finished. By October 24, 1939, it was ready for its first public rollout, and witnesses said it looked like something straight out of a sci-fi movie. Excitement skyrocketed. If this thing worked, the US would cement its place not only in science but also in engineering innovation. The next step, get it to the ship North Star, waiting in Boston Harbor. The snow cruiser would drive there on its own wheels, covering roughly 1,100 miles. As it rolled through towns and cities, crowds gathered to cheer it on like a parade. But the cruiser was so wide that it took up the entire lane, sometimes both lanes. And that caused quite a few headaches. Its top speed was about 25 miles per hour. Not bad for its time, but with its massive weight, that worked out to only 8 horsepower per ton. It even caused a 70,000 car traffic jam near Boston, according to local papers. Still, most headlines proudly read, "The Antarctic cruiser passed through our town." But this trip wasn't just for show, and soon, reality hit. A few days in, the hydraulic steering failed and had to be repaired. Then, while crossing a small bridge, the cruiser got stuck, its long nose wedged in place. The team spent an entire day freeing it, working under the gaze of curious crowds. Eventually, they got it moving again. Despite all the trouble, the snow cruiser completed its journey from Chicago to Boston, a trip that took more than 20 days. Now came the real test, getting it onto the ship. On November 15, 1939, the North Star set sail with the snow cruiser and its crew aboard. After about 7 weeks at sea, they reached the Bay of Whales in early January 1940. Unloading the giant was another nightmare. Wooden ramps had been built to lower it onto the ice, but moments into the process, part of the ramp gave way. One of the rear wheels dropped through. For a few seconds, everyone froze, but Poulter stayed calm, hit the throttle, and managed to pull the cruiser free using its own power. When its wheels finally touched Antarctic snow, the crew erupted in cheers. At last, the real journey could begin. Or so they thought. Within seconds, the excitement vanished. As the snow cruiser tried to move forward, its smooth tires began to spin helplessly. They had no traction at all on the icy surface. The 75,000-pound machine began to sink into the snow, nearly 3 feet deep. The design meant to help it glide had completely backfired. They tried everything, adding spare tires beside the front ones for more traction, chaining the rear wheels, even praying. When the engines roared again, it moved, but only in reverse. Strangely, it drove much better backward, likely due to its weight balance. So they made a decision, they would continue their mission in reverse. Yes, really. In Antarctica, survival matters more than pride. From the Little America base, they drove backward across the icy plains, managing to cover about 90 miles in total. But as they went on, more problems appeared. The long front and rear overhangs, meant to bridge crevasses, instead got stuck on uneven ground and small ice ridges. Even with the suspension at full height, the cruiser would get hung up and stop. It became clear that while the snow cruiser was a perfect shelter, it was a terrible exploration vehicle. After 23 frustrating weeks, Poulter made one of the hardest choices of his life. He cancelled the plan to cross Antarctica. On January 24, 1940, he ordered the crew to return to base. Leaving the continent, Poulter walked away from his dream, and left the snow cruiser behind, buried in the snow, to serve for a while as a temporary shelter. By the end of 1940, the remaining crew had also abandoned it. The world's attention soon shifted to another crisis, World War II, and the snow cruiser was forgotten. It's strange to feel sorry for a machine made of steel and bolts, but there it was, alone, abandoned in the ice. The journey that began with parades and pride ended in silence among the glaciers. In 1946 and 1958, new expeditions rediscovered the snow cruiser, frozen under layers of ice, but it was impossible to recover. By the 1960s, it's believed the ice beneath it broke away and drifted into the ocean, taking the snow cruiser into the deep sea, lost forever. A massive dream and a massive failure. $3.5 million, months of work, and the hopes of thousands, all sunk beneath the ice. So if you ever go diving near Antarctica, keep your eyes open. Who knows, maybe you'll see a 75,000-pound ghost resting at the bottom of the ocean. That's all from me this week. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, don't forget, I make all of this on my own, and your likes and comments are what keep it going. I'm Mysterious Reality. See you next time, and as always, take care.